Welcome back to this week's episode of the Campfire Series podcast. Today is Thursday, June 18th, 2020. I'm your host, Logan Sofarenko. Be sure to check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and YouTube. We got everything up and running. Today we have a very special guest joining us directly from, or he's a former member of the Broadway National Tour of Les Miserables. Please welcome Jean Valjean himself, Mr. Nick Cartell.
Thank you so much again for agreeing to come on the show and talk a little bit.
No worries at all.
How are you doing through all these crazy times?
It's definitely been it's been a journey. I think it's kind of a struggle for everybody. I left the tour last December, so kind of before everything really started happening. But for us here in New York, my wife and I, we actually just gave birth to a baby girl a little over a month ago. So that was an added struggle for sure.
No, absolutely. Was that one of the main reasons you had to leave the tour?
It wasn't a reason that I left the tour. My contract was up. I had been out on the tour at that point for 2.5 years. I was always planning on leaving when I did. It was just an added bonus that we ended up getting pregnant. So, and I wanted, we had talked about it, and I was like, I want to be home. And after 2.5 years, it was time for something new. It's a show that I love and that I'd love to do again. But right now, it was time for me to step back and step back in order to step forward again, I guess is the best way to say it.
Awesome. What was how long have you been performing? You can go as far back as high school if you want. Like, how long have you been just on the stage or in the craft?
I mean, I've been doing theater since I can remember. I mean, pretty much putting on shows for family members since I could walk and talk, like little skits and things like that in my home for my family. As far as on stage, I think my first actual show was when I was in 7th grade. I did an opera at my local church. And then the following year, I started doing community theater. And then, so I was probably 12 or 13, and I've been doing it pretty much ever since through community theater, through high school, through college, and then into the professional arena. Pretty much as I was getting out of, in my senior year of college, I started working for professional theaters in Arizona. I've worked for Disney in Japan, on and off for 3 years. So I've been doing it a very, very long time.
Where did you study for college?
I went to Arizona State University. I studied theater performance at Arizona State. It's one of those situations where I auditioned for the music theater department, and they did not take me. And so I was like, fine, I'm going to be a theater major. But I'm so glad that I did. It allowed me the opportunity to take classes that music theater majors were not allowed to take. As a theater major, I could take some of the acting courses that the music theater students couldn't. I was still able to do some music theater courses, but then I also did private coaching for voice outside of school. So I feel like it gave me a good, well-rounded education that then by the time that I was in my senior year, I was auditioning and working for professional theaters in Arizona where I grew up.
That's awesome. So you were on the tour for a little over 2 years. How did you get cast in Les Mis?
So for my journey with Les Mis, started in the March before the tour went out. So the tour went out in the September of 2017. My first audition was in March. I was actually out doing a special event. I'm part of a singing group called the Broadway Boys. So it's 6 guys. We sing Broadway music. All this really, really cool, tight arrangements of updated Broadway songs. I was out doing an event, and a friend of mine was going in for a callback and for Valjean. And I was like, I really hadn't even heard of the auditions. Hadn't even gotten an appointment through my agent yet. And I said, oh, and he goes, yeah. So I texted him like the next day that he went, and I said, how'd it go? He said, good. He goes, but apparently they can't find what they're looking for, so they're starting the search over again. So I took that as an opportunity to go, okay. And I wrote with my agent, and I said, can we try to get an audition for this? I'd really love to be seen. And so she reached out to casting. I was brought in March, and then I had, over the course of the following few months, March, I was finally cast at the very beginning of July in the show. So I had about 4 or 5 callbacks for the show.
How long did that process take? Like, of call, you said a couple months, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I would go in, like, my first audition was March. About 3 weeks later, I was back in for the team again. Then I was told, oh, we like Nick a lot, but we just think that he might be too young for the role. To which then I said, great, but I'd still love to come and be seen by the director, and I really love to work the material again. So then they brought me back in. That went well. So then it was just a process of back and forth and back and forth. And then my final callback for the show was actually the day after my mom passed away from ovarian cancer. So I found out that obviously she had been sick, battling for about 6 years. And my dad had called that week that I knew that there was going to be a callback. The date just had not been decided yet. And I said, they're like, I'm coming home. And they said, no, you need to stay. You need to stay and you need to see this through, because this could be a life-changing experience and opportunity. And we love you, and you need to be there for that. And so I didn't get to make it home. I was able to say goodbye to her through FaceTime and on the phone. But she was an angel on my shoulder that day when I went into that audition room. And so that, yeah, so so that was the end of my journey, was as I was cast right after she passed away. And then we started rehearsals about a month after that.
Did you dedicate, they're not just the run of the show, but everything all for her now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, she's such a sense of strength and inspiration for me. Just everything that she went through with all of her chemo treatments and a lot of the sacrifices that Valjean makes for people in the show. I really thought about my mom a lot in those moments, and was able to pull that feeling of selfless love in. Not being a parent until now, I was able to think about all the things that my mom had done for me, which really helped to inform the character, especially later in life as he ages through the show.
You said a little earlier how they thought maybe you were a little too young. Obviously, no one gets cast in Les Mis without obviously like seeing the show or being familiar with it. Like, there's been so many legendary actors that have played Jean Valjean. Do you take all of their performances and like maybe a little things you like and use it, or like do you make it your own? How do you mold, like with Caramu, like people like that?
So I think our directors were really great in the fact where they really allowed us to make the role our own. They really harkened back to the story in the novel and the book. And so there were little things that I liked that I would say that I saw other Valjeans do, but I can't remember certain specific character things necessarily that they did. There were things that I was able to pull from the novel, like as Valjean ages through the show, right? When we would get into kind of the final age of his life, which is from about the middle of Act 1. So when Valjean and Cosette escape into Paris, Valjean at that point there's a passage of time of 17 years, right? So at that point in my characterization, Valjean actually started walking with a limp, because of his age, and because I walked with a limp on my right leg, because that was the leg that Valjean was always hit in when he was in fights in the show. And even in the novel, there's one line that Javert says to Valjean when he sees him one time, saying, I recognized you by your walk, by your limp. And I was like, that's something, and I clocked that in the novel when I read it. And so I was able to incorporate that into my performance. So it's more for us, and for the way that the directors really worked with us was really making sure that we could have the flexibility to make the show our own, and make the characters come alive. And at the same time, still being true to the story and to the way that the original characters were written in the novel, and then the way that it's also sung. And so it kind of, it informs itself in a way. So, but we were able to make these characters. And if there are things that I did that Ramin did, or if there's things that I did that Colm did, great. I feel like everybody has their favorite Valjean when they come and see the show, right? I have a huge responsibility of making sure that I represent the show and the character in a way that is true to who that character is. I might not be your favorite Valjean that you've ever seen, but as long as I do my job in making sure that I'm telling that story, then that's what my job is supposed to be. So it's just making it and finding a way to not copy somebody else's performance, because you don't want to do that, while at the same time being true to the character itself.
Yeah, when you came, your cast came in to the Pantages last year.
Yeah,
and life changing. You definitely did your job. I remember we came backstage, and we just bumped into you on stage, and I remember my dad saying, "Wow, that voice came out of him." Like what is like the routine that you like? How do you take care of such a powerful voice like that? Like, do you diet? Do you like, what are your routines before shows? Like, tell us a little bit about that kind of aspect of it.
I mean, being out on the road, it was, making sure that I worked out as much as I could. Sleep is such a huge part of it. Sleeping, making sure that I steamed my vocal cords, making sure that I took vitamins, and that I ate well. I really didn't drink alcohol, but maybe once a week. It really was, it's funny. I always said to people that it was like I was always training for like an Olympic sport. And because our voices are muscles, so we have to be sure that they're taken care of, and that I would warm up usually an hour to 2, sometimes 3 hours before the show. Usually in the early afternoon, I warm up for the show that night and then keep my voice warm. But then once I was in the show, I was able to do that because of the role of Valjean itself. But if I was not ready when the show started, I was fighting, because Valjean is shot out of a cannon right from the start of the show. There's no warming up like a lot of the other characters that are in the show. Valjean is shot right out of a cannon. He has to immediately just burst off of that stage as this animalistic, creature who's just been beaten down. So if my voice and my body were not ready for that, I would injure myself. So it was really making sure that I got enough sleep and warmed up, made sure that I was taking care of myself as best I could.
What was the hardest song that you had to sing, in your opinion?
In my opinion, the hardest song that I had to sing was the soliloquy right at the beginning of the show. It ends kind of the first 12 minutes of the show, just because it is such a physical, for me, it was a physically daunting task at the end of that 12 minutes. Valjean does not leave the stage for the first 12 minutes of the show. And by the end of that, I was tired. So it was definitely making sure that I paced myself so that I had something to give for that soliloquy. It was funny. A lot of people were like, isn't it Bring Him Home? Where for me, Bring Him Home was not the hardest moment. Bring Him Home was actually my favorite moment to sing every night. Just because my voice was warmed up by that point, because it was in the middle of Act 2. And I could just sit and I could live into character and sing that song with that orchestra and just have that moment of just stillness every night. It was truly my favorite. But the hardest thing, I think, for me every night was soliloquy.
For people that don't necessarily have, there are people in musical theater that don't have classical voices. They can't belt like crazy, but they're starting to train a little bit. What's some advice you can give? Like, can people who don't have those voices do a show like Les Mis? Or what are the steps you have to take in order to do a show like this and like be awesome at
it? So my first piece of advice would be, if you sing with soundtracks, continue to sing with soundtracks. It was a piece of advice that was given to me actually the first time that I came to New York. What you hear in a soundtrack is what is being cast, right, is what they're looking for sound wise, but figure out your own way to sing it. Nobody is going to sing it the same way. And when you walk into an audition room or when you're in the show, people aren't expecting you to be a carbon copy. They want to hear something different, a little different, while still paying homage to the show. So figure out your own way to sing it. And then if this is something that you truly want to do and you really want to be on that stage, and I would say get a vocal coach if you can, because it will only serve you to make sure that you are not injuring yourself. I think that there's a lot of people that can go into it being like, I'm just going to belt my face off and it's going to be great. You can actually do more damage. You can actually injure yourself more than anything else. So I would say just be sure that it's helpful to get a coach to really, I took voice lessons every 2 weeks while I was out on the road for Les Mis to make sure that my instrument was in tip-top shape. Another reason that I was able to sing it every single night. And it was one of those things where I make sure even today that I'm still as warmed up as possible before I actually start singing a song or conquering an audition or something like that. So your voices are muscles. The more you use them, the better they're going to be.
Would you tell people, because obviously you told us a little bit about like you're doing this 8 times a week. Is Jean Valjean one of the hardest musical theater roles out there?
I think for men, it's the hardest musical theater role out there. It is a marathon every night. It's especially this version of the show, this reimagined kind of 25th anniversary version that's now being done worldwide. It's a much more physical version of Les Mis than anybody's ever seen before. It's very daunting. It's very, like I said, at the beginning, it's very animalistic. You have to age through the show. You are on stage about 85% of the show. You are carrying people. You are fighting. You are falling to the ground, falling to your knees, along with singing everything that you have to sing every night. So it is a very daunting task, but it's incredibly rewarding at the same time.
I think one of the coolest parts of the show, in my opinion, I love One Day More at the end of Act 1. I love that song. What is that like as a performer? Like, do you get goosebumps standing, hearing your cast? Like, what does that number mean to you when you're on stage?
It's one of the greatest closing numbers to an act ever written. And it truly is a magical moment of theater that happens every single night. The minute that you hear what we call the magic notes, the and you start, it's one of those moments that you feel the audience like excited to finally hear the end of Act 1, right? And even listening to it now, I still get goosebumps, and it still touches me because I'm like, I was a part of that. That's really cool. And so, yeah, it's probably one of the favorite moments that I have on stage is just being able to sing that song with everybody, and to bring that moment of musical theater kind of like history to life.
What was the exposure like? Playing one of the most iconic roles in musical theater and going from city to city, what was the exposure like? You know, through social media, through fan interaction, at stage doors. What was that whole aspect of the performer's life like?
You know, it can be. I will say it can be exhausting. You know, everybody's like, "Oh, it's so exciting! You're on tour." Yes, it is. It is really cool. We're on tour. We're in a different city pretty much every week. If we're lucky, we get to sit down like we did in Los Angeles for a month. But that can also be exhausting too, because while a lot of people are like, "Oh, it's so exciting! You get to, you know, you live out of a hotel." Yeah, it's exciting for the first week, and then you're living out of a hotel for 2.5 years. You're having to pack up a suitcase every week, you know, and so it can be physically exhausting to have to, like, for me, I didn't sleep well on travel days. So before a travel day, I didn't sleep well, which meant that then when I got to a city, I was tired, which meant that then I had to go to bed early because the next day was Tuesday and we started the run of the show. And if I started the week exhausted, then I couldn't catch up for the rest of my shows that week. Along with not only just having to physically do the show, a lot of the time for me, there was also, and other people in the show, there's also press. So we will have to go and promote the show by doing radio or TV interviews early in the morning. And then we have to also meet with our fans after after the shows, which we love to do. I mean, that's the reason, that's what brings us the most joy, is meeting the people that we're able to bring the show to, that are so excited and they want to meet us and we want to meet them. But all of that adds up. So it's just making sure that you pace yourself through the week. I can't give everything that I need to give on a Tuesday because I still have to give the same performance on a Sunday. So it's making sure that my performance across the week looks the same, while also making sure that it's giving 100% as much as I can every single time I step on that stage. So it definitely became an exercise in pacing myself, while at the same time, I hope that my performances never faltered, that you saw the same thing when you came to see the show.
How did you make it new every night?
That is a testament to the material. It's so rich. There's so much that I still haven't, I feel like I scratched the surface of Valjean, right? I feel like I know who that character is, how I played him at the time. Now that I'm a dad, it would be even deeper. It would mean even more. It's the way that you sing certain words, your interaction with other people on stage. The audience changes every night. That's what makes it new and exciting. How an audience reacts to a certain number or to a certain thing. When we were in Los Angeles, I mean, it was like it was a rock concert every night. That downbeat would start and the audience would just start screaming.
Oh, yeah.
That gives us this
Crazy.
boost of energy. It gave us this boost of energy that we were so excited to be a part of, because we knew that the audience was excited to see us. So that changes every night. So that's also the amazing thing about musical theater, is that it changes every night, but it changes for the better. The show's never going to be the same. And it's what keeps it exciting. And I think it's what keeps people coming back to see theater.
What was one of the most thrilling theaters, just one of your favorite theaters to perform on during tour?
Probably for me, it was when we took the show to Tempe, Arizona, which was home for me. I played the show on the campus of my alma mater. On the touring house is Gammage Auditorium, and it's on Arizona State University. That felt like a rock concert every night. I had people in the audience every night. That was one of those moments it was just so great to finally be able to bring the show that I love so much, and this character that I love so much, and this role that I had been playing to my home, to really bring it home. And just the love that the entire cast felt, that I felt, it was a remarkable experience. There are so many great cities though that I love. I loved playing Los Angeles. I love LA. I loved playing San Francisco, Seattle, Montreal, when we went up to Montreal in Canada. All over the place. There's different cities across this country, different theaters across this country that hold a special place in my heart because of this show and because of different things that happened while we were playing that city. So it's hard to pinpoint one, but Tempe holds a very special place just because it's home for me.
Now, I know, like, once a tour goes out, what if like an actor's married? Like, did your wife travel with you to each city and every hotel and every housing area they were in? She was with you there?
No. So I mean, it varies with each couple. My wife is also an actress. She has a career here in New York City. So she didn't travel with me because she couldn't leave her job and her work here. So I was very fortunate in the fact that I had toured before. I had been on the Phantom of the Opera tour, and we had decided after that if I was ever to go back on a tour, that we had to make a rule that we would go no more than 3 or 4 weeks without seeing each other in person. And that's what we did. We went no more than 3 or 4 weeks without seeing each other in person, where she would fly to me, because it was always her coming to me, because I only had a week sit down in certain cities. So I could never really fly home. So I was very fortunate in the fact that she could fly to me and come in for a long weekend, or even just she would get in Friday night and she would leave Sunday night. But at least it was something. FaceTiming every day. I'd FaceTime during performances when I was doing makeup changes. I would talk to her. Every night, we made it work. There are some couples that would be out on the road, and they just it's somebody that they're like, I can work from anywhere, so I'm just gonna go out on the road with you, and that works for them. For us, that didn't work. I'm very fortunate though that we were able to figure out a way with technology and flying across the country that she was able to come and see me.
That's awesome. That's actually, good to hear, obviously, because some people right now are battling, long distance because of quarantine. But
Yes.
this is a question you can share only if you feel comfortable sharing. What was a weird mishap that, or like the weirdest, like, thing that didn't really go right in your duration of the tour?
For the most part, the show ran beautifully. There were a couple mishaps. There always are. Technology is a thing. So there was a couple times where the barricade didn't move down like it was supposed to. There was one time where I went to fire the gun to pretend to shoot Javert as I let him go off the barricade, and it didn't fire. So they had to shoot one of the blanks. It was little things like that. There was one moment. It was our opening night of the tour. We were in Providence, Rhode Island. It was opening night, and we got to the very end of the show. We were singing, "To love another person is to see the face of God," and the ensemble was walking in singing, "Do you hear the people sing?" And right at that moment, somebody screamed, "Help, help, doctor, she's choking, she's choking." And there was a woman that had been crying, and she thought it was also a great time to eat a peanut M&M, and she started choking on a peanut M&M. And so we had to stop the show, and and she was fine. She got it back up, and then we had to restart the show at the same place. Oklahoma City, it was in Act 1. I was just getting ready to sing "Who Am I?" and the fire alarm went off. And so we had to stop the show for 20-25 minutes because everybody had to evacuate the building. So because they had to check for fire. So it's those types of things that are those moments in theater where you're like,
live theater.
It is what it is. Exactly. Live theater. It is what it is, and you get through it.
That fire alarm thing must be a common theme. We saw What the Constitution Means to Me at the Mark Taper Forum this year in LA. Fire alarm went off there, but I can't even imagine what it would have been like in a big, proscenium, huge like theater.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah. I don't know. It happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for
my pleasure.
Like, honestly, let me just my family, our favorite classical musical is Les Mis. My mom always watches Les Mis clips on YouTube, and I finally somehow got a hold of you singing "Bring Him Home" on YouTube when you did it for Broadway.com.
Yeah.
I got a hold of that. I've actually never seen that before, so I want to say to you in person, it's kind of cool I get to say it to you. You are very talented, and I'm a very big fan. So I really appreciate you coming in and meeting with me. But
yes.
I'll let you know when this episode this drops. It'll be a week or two. But just thank you so much again. Best of luck with your family and everything.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you so much.
No, absolutely. Starting this journey during quarantine isn't ideal, but I'm pretty sure once you get through it, it's gonna be amazing. It's gonna be a fun story to tell.
It's actually been a blessing to just have this time of completely being kind of locked down in quarantine altogether, which a lot of people are like, I can't stand being inside. And I'm like, actually, you know what? You're saving lives by doing it. And so, and we're very lucky that we have this opportunity to all be together. So, but thank you so much for having me today. And I hope I was able to answer some questions. Yeah.
Best of luck, best wishes. Stay safe out there.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, Dick.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you like what you're hearing, please tune in every Wednesday and every Thursday for all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts or YouTube. Feel free to like and subscribe to us on YouTube, and also to give us a rating and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you every week on Wednesday and Thursday. We got some exciting guests coming up. But right here at Campfire Series Podcast, this is Logan Sofranco signing off.